the March 13, 2023 meeting of the Cultural Planning Subcommittee for the City of Portsmouth. My name is John Mayer. I am co-chair of the subcommittee, and I serve along with my colleague Karen Rosania and Jeffrey Cooper, our secretary. Welcome all who are here in person and in Zoom. So before I turn things over to Karen, just want to make a brief note. This is our first meeting of the subcommittee since we were established on February 6th. That was when we were formed, but now this is our opportunity actually to begin and do our work. Karen, Jeffrey, and I have done a lot since the time we met, so our goal today is to orient you and update you, and most important, we want you all to leave here with a sense of purpose and an assignment that you can be involved in. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Karen.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for everybody for being here. Okay, I'm not going to do acrobatics over the computer here. So really thrilled to have you, and John and I are thrilled to be leading such a talented and diverse group, and we look forward to a productive meeting today. So I'm just going to kick things off just to review the agenda, which you all should have in front of you. We have a pretty full agenda, so we're going to really try to keep everything right on track today. What we're going to move into after I announce the agenda is your superpower. So hopefully everybody came prepared with something you're really good at and you like to do relative to the cultural planning process. Jeffrey's going to lead the approval of the minutes. I'm going to go through the statement of purpose, which we've had several people on the subcommittee weigh in. It's a draft, and we want to get everybody's input on that. John has done a tremendous amount of work around the cultural planning process and has come up with a great framework, again, draft to get everybody's input. Ellen has offered to share a perspective from the 2022 cultural plan, which I think is going to be important. We're going to keep that very high level because you'll see that that's also one of the proposed task groups. So we think that's an area to dig in a little bit more. And then we've pulled together a scope of work for a consultant or consultants, and Sean is really helping us with that and will provide us an update on where all that's going. And we hope to have at the end of the meeting, we're going to try to reserve about 10 minutes or so for all of you to break into your new work groups. And one of the areas of success that we feel coming out of this meeting is, again, we have such amazing backgrounds and talent on this subcommittee, is for all of you to look at the work groups that we're proposing and please sign up. We want everybody leaving with an assignment and a group that you're really going to be contributing to for this cultural planning process. So let's get into the superpowers. And we thought...
Suzanne, did you have a question?
Suzanne, yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
just flailing.
So we're going to do a round robin, and if you could all just share, again, this is an opportunity to bring your skills forward and things that you actually like to do, which we hope will fit nicely into the work group assignments. And if you could just keep it brief. So I'll just kind of kick things off, and I'll say something I'm very passionate about is startup. I've had the chance to start up numerous positions and initiatives in my own company. So I love to do that, and I guess I'll kind of put that under the project management umbrella.
And my superpower is fixing things. So sort of the opposite of startup. It's just swooping in when things don't go well and help heal and get things on track.
Good morning, Alan Chase. I guess for the purposes of this, what brought me to this committee was over a good many years traveling in the Navy. I've always been a part of community, specifically in this regard, nonprofit, usually volunteering. So I have seen the end result, and I kind of envision myself both having the spectator, the volunteer worker, and now hopefully a planner. So that's kind of what brought me here. Thanks.
Hi, and I'm Ed Simeone. I kind of enjoy facilitating strategic planning processes. And so what I'd like to do is assess where things are at a particular point right now, what has worked in the past, what has not worked, and what we have to focus on in creating a current plan and ultimately getting to what I like to call the therefore. So what does it all mean in the end?
Hello, I'm Gerard Gonzalez. I guess my superpower would be shape-shifting, which takes into account John and Ed. I like to fix things, re-engineer. I'm also pretty good at strategic planning, so I've done a lot of work with restructuring organizations. Yeah.
I'm Tom Koffold, and I guess my superpower is I'm willing to do anything to get the job done.
We love people like you.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Emma Stratton. I'm with the Portsmouth Historical Society. This is actually my first meeting. I'm sorry to miss the first one, so nice to be here with you all. I would say my two superpowers, well, one, community engagement. It's a big part of why I'm here, but also as a director, delegating is also a superpower as well.
Hi, I'm Amanda Kidd-Kessler from the NHAA, and my superpower is seeing the big picture. I like to see myself as a hawk looking down.
Do you want to tell people who might not know what NHAA is?
Yes, of course, the New Hampshire Art Association.
I'm Ellen Feinberg. I guess my superpower will be demonstrated shortly. I am the only person who sits on the committee now who sat on the Cultural Commission, on the committee that formed the cultural plan the last time that this was done 20 years ago. So I am supposedly the memory.
We all need that.
I'm Jeffrey Cooper. My superpower is never panic and always stay calm. And also to see the big picture, and I kind of say, like, I balance order and chaos in order to kind of like make them work together and move forward.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Danforth. I'm an alternate. My superpower is that boots on the ground, interviewing people, getting feedback, taking notes, and then reporting back to the committee.
Hi, my name is Russ Grazier of Portsmouth Music and Arts Center. I also co-chair the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee, of which this is a subcommittee of. My superpower is probably the ability to connect and network with a wide variety of people within the community, whether it's within arts and culture or the broader based community. Having worked here for over 20 years now, I feel like I've fairly well networked myself into the community, so when we need stakeholder input and gathering stakeholder input, I'm happy to be a part of that, making sure we're reaching all voices in the community.
So I'm Suzanne Woodland. I'm the Deputy City Manager, and I've spent 20-plus years in the legal department. So I am here because you are at the point of talking about a request for proposals. So this is my wheelhouse. So in some ways, I am helping Sean deliver the product that you would like out the door next. So that is why, in part, that I am here today, and to kind of see if we can make the next step. Sean has kind of looped me into the draft of your scope of work, and we've kind of talked about some elements of that and where we might want to have some conversation as we look to put something out the door. So that's why I'm here today, wearing sort of both hats. So.
Hi, Sean Clancy. I'm the Assistant City Manager for Economic and Community Development. I'm also your liaison, your staff liaison for the team here. And I was going to go with something boring like my superpower is organization, but what really energizes me is prioritization. Because you can have a lot of things going on, but if they're not the right priority or in the right order, you might not get where you're going. So glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm Kate Cook. I am your city council liaison. So I guess my superpower is being able to support and share whatever you want shared at the city council level with the community in city council meetings. So without having to put in a special request for making a large report back, I'm happy to do that for you whenever you need it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen Battles, I'm an alternate. I'm a good in-depth researcher, and after having designed print communications for a number of years, I know how to weight information for clarity and understanding, which might come in handy.
Awesome.
Yeah, wonderful.
morning. Ben Van Camp with the Chamber of Commerce for Portsmouth. Not really a member of the committee, just interested and want to hear what's going on. So you'll see me hiding in the corner a lot. My superpower would be juggling, not physically with balls, but projects and the like. So I have the pleasure of working with the entire business community of Portsmouth, and arts and culture is certainly a good chunk of that. And I'm excited to hear how this goes and see where this process takes us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've got a couple people on the line. So Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Faulkner, and I think my superpower is in strategic experience, both at an organizational level and on a community-based level in terms of arts advocacy, having worked with cultural commissions and districts before, and having now led an organization in Portsmouth. I'm very passionate about helping the community engage with this, advocating for the role of culture in our community, but also I really hear around the table the desire for clarity in terms of the plan itself, and I hope I can be helpful there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Beth. And I thought I saw Barbara on there, but she might be hiding behind my agenda.
I am here.
Hey, Barbara. Morning.
Barbara Massar, I'm the Executive Director of Pro Portsmouth. Along with Russ, I'm the co-chair of the Portsmouth Art and Nonprofits Committee. And I am also the chairperson of the Portsmouth 400 Legacy Committee Sculpture Review Committee. And as a little plug for that, I hope you all can attend the meeting next Monday at noon to meet the sculptor who'll be visiting us from California. As somebody who creates events, I think a lot of people might say my superpower is creating events, and that wouldn't be accurate. First of all, on a humorous note, I'm really good at closing streets. But more than anything, I see my job as a problem solver. So hopefully that can help everyone here.
Wonderful. So for the Hawks in the room, you're probably seeing all the pinball connections and really a lot of the needs that we've identified can be well addressed by the skills and abilities in this room. So that'll be exciting to see all that unfold. So thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. So I think that's important to know about one another, not just where we work and what we do, but your skills and your strengths and what you like to do. So just moving along on the agenda, the next item is the minutes, and I'll turn it over to Jeffrey.
Okay, so does anyone have questions or comments about what we circulated?
I have a few edits, just super quick.
Okay.
On the present roll call, you have Ben listed as a member of the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee, and he's not officially on that committee. He just comes, like he said today, to be an active part of the community. And I also, on the second page, the note that Robin Larry Meyerkoff has offered to, it's just grammatical, either will fill in or to fill in, but it's a weird sentence.
Which number is that?
It's right before number 5, just above number 5. Note that Robin Laurie, I think if you get rid of the word will, you're fine.
Okay, yeah.
And then on item 6, I can't remember if we made an official decision on this, but I just want to make sure that there's clarity for everyone in the room, because I think it's a good time to bring attention to that. If a committee member misses 2 consecutive meetings, it states in here that they will become an alternate, and an alternate will become a voting member. And Barbara can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that, it was a busy meeting last time, so I'm not recalling exactly how we set this up, but I'm guessing the intention is that we want everyone to remain through the entire process, but we want to make sure that the voting members of the committee are consistently in attendance. Does this sound accurate, Barbara?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
it does.
All right, cool. So I just wanted to clarify that and make sure that.
So
was
I
in there
could just
accurately.
add a line, say, in order to encourage
I don't think you need
attendance.
to add anything. I thought it was a good moment to refresh everyone on that and make sure everyone was clear on it and make sure it was accurate, because I couldn't remember exactly. But it sounds like that's exactly what it's supposed to say, so it's perfect, Jeffrey.
Okay.
Thank you.
So 2 corrections. Ben is not on the committee, and there's an extra word.
Yep, that's it.
And other than that,
They're fantastic notes, Jeffrey. Thank you.
oh, thank
They're
you.
really good.
So a motion to accept the minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, everybody. So just moving along here, so John, well, I guess it's me. And what I'm going to share is the proposed committee purpose. And Barbara had a great suggestion several weeks ago, is could we pull together a couple of us and start to put our minds around a statement of purpose for our committee, which we thought we could use as a jumping-off point, really, for everything moving forward. So I'm going to try, I am not a Zoom expert, to see if I can get this to come up without disconnecting us from the meeting. So bear with me for one moment. Yeah. And let's see. I had all of these organized before, so. Okay. It helps when you name the file Statement of Purpose, and then you just look under Statement of Purpose. Okay, and let me share the screen, because I'm not sharing, right? You can't see my Statement of Purpose, okay. And how do I do that? This? Okay. Share screen. Statement of purpose. Yay! Okay. Oh, that's not what I wanted. No, wait a minute. Just had it up. Okay, there it is. Sorry about that. Okay. I hope to become more technologically advanced as the co-chair of your committee. So, I'll just give you all just a minute to read this.
Do you think you could make the types?
Can you just read it for everyone?
I'll read it. Let me put my glasses on. Okay. So, to lead the process in creating the next cultural plan by soliciting and engaging diverse stakeholder input and ideas across the broader Portsmouth community.
Karen, if you go down to the right hand, at the bottom corner, right
Okay.
there, and just draw that over to 100%.
Ah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll just state, as you're all kind of mulling that over, our goal was to keep this fairly broad at this point in time in the early stages. And at some point, not too far off in the distant future, we'd like to develop a mission statement, but we thought it's probably too premature because we don't have the community feedback yet for this 2023 cultural plan. So is there anything glaring on this that you think we're missing or we should be adding?
I guess my question is, should this be a bullet underneath a broader banner that says, here's why we were created? And I don't think we should wordsmith that here, but, and now, but I guess that would be my question.
And that's the statement of purpose should be the why we were created. So do you think that that's not addressing the why we were created, the two
I
lines
think
there?
it's one of the I think it's a means by which we're going to get to an end,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
And so I just wondered if that's a broad enough purpose, and I don't know what other people think about that comment, and whether we want to start with this and just move on, or...
I think you're bringing up some good feedback.
If I
Well,
may.
the end result is a report and a document that's adopted by the city, and that's not stated.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go?
I think it's really clear around the statement of purpose for the subcommittee itself, and I'm wondering if some of, Ellen, your questions might be to the why around a cultural plan, not the why around the subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say that we do have an original statement of why there's an arts and nonprofits committee that oversees, that created this committee. It's interesting because it had a lot to do with how the city can help the arts and nonprofits within the community to recover from the pandemic. It was really specifically tied to the pandemic, but I think this may be a topic that could be brought up at the arts and culture, or the arts and nonprofits committee level, about what the ongoing purpose of that committee is, because what I think that gets at is the actual needs of the arts community, the needs of the community at large, which I think is what Ellen's speaking to, is, how does a cultural plan serve the community, and why are we doing a cultural plan for the community, not just to do the cultural plan. Is that accurate or close?
So.
So maybe we can take this to the Arts and Nonprofits Committee and come
Okay.
back. I think there's so much on the plate, I don't want to slow the process down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a point of reference, on the February, too much coffee, February 16th meeting, the committee framework references item 1, committee purpose, generalized by John. The cultural plan group will lead the process to develop a new arts and culture plan for the Portsmouth community before the end of the 2023 calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the committee purpose statement. It's cited on February 16th.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's pretty
If
consistent.
I may,
Yeah, Barbara.
we, a smaller group of us, Russ and I met with the executive, with the officers here, and we started to get into the weeds, right? And we said, hold on, before we do this, let's just put a nice broad statement out there that says, this is our plan, this is what we're gonna do, and let's do it. Because if we get too caught up in trying to identify or define everything with really fine language, we're not gonna move forward. So the history of this, and Russ was going there too, is really this was a recommendation to update the 20-year-old cultural plan. That's why we're here, because there's a plan and it hasn't been touched in 20 years. So I don't mean to make it overly simple, but frankly, it's that simple. So I don't think we should try to get too fine, into the detail or the language. I think this is a really good statement. We're going to lead a process. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. We haven't talked about the RFP, who's going to help us do this. That's why we said, let's not try to get really almost kind of too cute here and create a mission statement before we really know what that mission is. So I think this is really great, and I think it's fine for where we are now before we get into the next steps.
Is this just for internal purposes, or is this going?
I mean, it's obviously public now that it's up on the screen, but it's really to define us as a subcommittee, what our purpose is, which is important for the public to know that. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on then. So I'm going to turn it over to John, who again has done a tremendous amount of work around understanding cultural plans, cultural planning processes. We've been looking at a lot of best practices across the nation and even outside of the U.S. To really see what's worked and what hasn't worked. So I'm going to share.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Karen. Yeah. So I also wanted to just share a little bit, besides simply the committee purpose, I've started to put together an outline of how this committee works. I called it a framework, so we can continue to develop that with even more details. But it has the duties of officers, duties of members, and other details. I've been accused of being a little bit in the weeds, but I think, just riffing off of what Barbara said, I do think words matter, and I think we're going to want to have agreements about what we mean by a cultural plan. I think there's a risk that if we say we're doing a cultural plan and we haven't defined it, we may not satisfy what expectations are for doing cultural planning. So just building off of that, I sent a reminding email and was trying to figure out how not to overwhelm you with paper. So I put a PS at the bottom that had some of the keywords that I had discovered in my literature review. I'm not going to read those keywords, but trust me, each of us, as we're involved in these different task groups, will have an opportunity to develop and refine those keywords. But I do think it's really important to be sure we know what we mean when we're saying we're doing a cultural planning process. That's our job, to lead a process. And what I've learned, and I'll say thanks to Ellen, we've had several conversations, we don't write the cultural plan. The cultural plan is an expression of what we learn from our community. So it is our responsibility to engage the community and get their feedback so their vision can be what we put into the cultural plan. So the other revelation that I had is that I've really discovered that there are two types of cultural plans that come from different types of communities. One is where there's a community that does not have an arts council. One of the things about an arts council is they're often targeted as the implementing body or the agent that carries out actions that are developed in the cultural plan. Portsmouth now does not have a arts council, but if you look at cultural plans from communities where there are arts councils, you can see that it's more direct for them to identify who is the agent that will carry out the actions that are identified. Without an arts council, a cultural plan is aspirational. It's visionary. We say these are the things that we wish could happen. When there is something like an arts council or an implementing body, it's easier to identify who's responsible for those actions. And I think some people talked about the 2002 plan as being aspirational at that time. Portsmouth didn't have ArtSpeak. So we were talking about things we wanted. Actually, one of the goals of that plan was to create an arts agency, and they did. It's no longer in place, but we're back to that point again. But there are other cultural plans. I think Nashua has one. They have an arts council, and it's easy when you read their cultural plan, you can see these are things that the committee is going to do. They put a time frame on it. They have actions that are specific. Anyway, so that was another bit of learning I did. And after our meeting, I'm totally happy to share. And for any who are interested, you know how to reach me, and I can continue to share some of the documents that I found. And I'll just also say, besides our work here to build a cultural plan, I think we may also want to endeavor to create an arts committee again for Portsmouth before we're done, because I think that'll help our work at the end.
John, you mentioned there were two. There's one without,
yeah.
And then, so I'm assuming then there would be one that has.
That do have them. Okay. Nashua has an arts council.
Okay, thank you.
That's, and there are many other, I mean, some of the larger communities, like there's a great example from Boulder, Colorado, or even a cultural plan from Boston. Sort of hate to bring up Boston because we're in the shadow of Boston, but it's actually really inspiring. If you could scrub out the words Boston and put Portsmouth in it, you can see that there are some parallel issues that that community faces that we do, and some of the ambitions of the Arts Council in Boston. It's actually a office out of the mayor's office, is to build enough ownership of goals in the arts plan that it doesn't rely on the Arts Committee to do the work. So that actually is kind of inspiring to read that. I'll stop there. I think we're worried about time and don't. So, any other questions that okay. You are at risk for me telling you everything I've learned. I'm not going to go there, but there's a lot.
Yeah, and John's really uncovered a lot of great information. And as you hear the dialogue going on, you'll see a lot of these wish list needs, if you will, have carried over to the proposed task groups. So one of the areas John just brought up is structure. You know, should there be some sort of a structure for a future arts council that has been successful in other municipalities that we might want to mimic in some way? So you'll see all this once we get to the proposed task groups, areas that, again, for discussion, and then areas for people to raise their hand and say, I'd really like to tackle that, and kind of dig in on that a little bit more and figure out where we can take that. So I think, Ellen, we're going to turn it over to you to give us a high-level overview of 2002. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to start before that with something I didn't know. And when I was doing some research, I found out that in 1989, there was a 40-page report to the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the Arts, City of Portsmouth. The mayor at the time was Evelyn Sorrell. And I'm not going to name all the people on the committee. I have all this information, and I can send it to you after this meeting. But the report was a result of the cultural assessment of Portsmouth conducted by the committee. And so that was really interesting to me. The report called for the city to support the arts, beginning with the appointment of a city arts agency. An arts advocacy leader and liaison to the arts community was seen as, quote, essential to the growth of the cultural future of Portsmouth. Well, then out of that, in December 2019, Mayor Sorrell then created the Blue Ribbon Committee to develop the cultural plan as the next step. And in the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee was appointed in 2000, and then in the spring of that year, there was a survey and focus groups. There were 82 people altogether who were somehow touched by the survey process, which included many different avenues. There were written surveys, there were meetings, there were groups convened, and all the details will be in the information I send you, but I don't want to get down in that level right now. There actually was stuff in the Portsmouth Herald. There were, as I said, the general public was surveyed in Market Square and at a local pub. The Button Factory was surveyed, and the public was surveyed at a city council presentation. So all of that information was put together. They held, the Arts Committee held a work session with the council in October 2001, and the cultural plan was presented and approved by the city council in December 2001. And then the next step was to include the cultural plan in the city's master plan. And that happened in January 2002. And then it was implementing the cultural plan, and that process went on from there. The cultural plan was published as a special insert in the Portsmouth Herald in 2002, and then distributed. There were printed, high-quality printed copies. This is a copy of that was the high-quality printed copy. There were, I think, 750 of these that were published, but there was also a newsprint in version of that was included with the Herald. And then out of that came the arts agency that was formed. And as John said, that agency was not part of the city. It was not a city committee, but actually was a standalone agency. And I think personally that I would recommend going forward from here that with this cultural plan that we have something that is part of the city itself rather than a standalone agency, but I don't want to get, so I will, if you have any questions now, I'd be glad to answer them, but this has a summary of what was also in this plan, the highlight areas of that, for those of you who haven't seen it, so.
And we asked Ellen if she could just give a high-level overview today, but this is another proposed task group, because we do think it's important to do kind of a deep dive into the 2002 plan and learn from it, and what are things we're going to want to replicate, what are things we're going to want to change, other recommendations. So that's the reason we're just doing high level. And Ellen also brought up an important point around the master plan, and it's a little deja vu because we are on kind of an expedited timeline for the 2023 Portsmouth Cultural Plan, because we are also trying to get this integrated into the master plan. And if Councillor Cook wanted to just speak to that briefly, we did talk about this during the Arts and Nonprofits Committee, but we just want to make sure everybody is aware of kind of the time frame and really why we're trying to get this accomplished before the end of the year. So do you want to speak to that briefly? Because I think that's really important for everybody to know about.
Of course. Thank you. So the master planning process currently has an estimated start date of around January of 2024. So we try to incorporate all the other planning pieces into that master plan. There are several things kind of in the works. There's also the climate action plan process, which will be wrapping up in December. It's anticipated to be wrapping up in December as well. And then all those plans get incorporated into the bigger master planning process so that when the planning board, which is the entity that kind of starts tackling that first, starts that process, they can look at the plans and see where they can incorporate goals or ideas within the bigger master plan for the city. That was done with the last cultural plan, but we haven't had one in so long that, in fact, the last master planning process wouldn't have had updates with a new cultural plan. So the goal is to get them into this master planning process, because the master planning process doesn't happen then again for many, many years. And so you don't want to miss that window altogether. There is a little bit of flexibility there, though, so you should be aware the master planning process takes a long time.
Great. Thanks, Helen. We're back to you, and we're doing a good job with the agenda here.
Okay.
Right on time.
So this next section is when we're going to talk about actually the process for planning. One of our assignments for Karen and Jeffrey and I that was given to us at the February meeting was to develop an RFP for the cultural plan. So it felt a little bit like cart before the horse, but as best as we could, we dove into that. So, and you've seen a document, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on during this segment of the meeting. But I guess what I wanted to do, and this builds off of some of the comments that Ellen shared from the 2002 process, there is, in some of the literature, we found toolkits to help with cultural planning. And the process actually isn't too surprising. We're in the stage of preparing for cultural planning, doing information gathering and research. So we're right on target for that very early stuff. We're getting our act together. We're forming our committee. We're coming up with a clear idea of what we want to do. We will want to create what I would call an overall project plan that would have really specific details about who's doing what and what all these pieces mean for the entire process. And each of these steps will have more information about that. And that's something that one of our task groups would be charged with, creating the overall plan for the project and, rolling in all the actions that we're working on. The most important and meaningful part of the process will be the next, which is community engagement, assessing information, and doing analysis. And that has to be planned. We don't want to randomly go out and interview our friends and bring back what we learned. We want to do it in a really formatted way and be guided so we know how that information will be compiled and how that will be put into a meaningful document. So after the engagement work is done, then we move to information review, organizing the plan, and talking with some of the stakeholders in the city. Writing the plan is the next, finalizing the plan, presenting it to City Council for adoption, and then implementation. So there actually are 7 steps in the process, but we're right on target with the information gathering planning. As we get our committees together, then we'll begin the big engagement work. And I'm happy, and I did include in that email I sent one of the most helpful links to toolkit from British Columbia, Creative City. It's really well-written outline of the planning process. I have a paper copy of it with me here, and I'm happy to share after the meeting. But again, anyone with questions, I will follow up with information. So I'll turn it over to Karen now.
So great. So going back to what Kate was saying in terms of a fairly aggressive time frame to get this cultural planning process in place, or cultural plan in place. We will say from a lot of the other municipalities that we've looked at, they had anywhere from 11 to 24 months. I think in total we have about 8. So it will be a very condensed time frame. But one of the things we realized pretty quickly, and thankfully we have some funding from the city for a consultant or consultants. And I appreciate many of you got back to me with your input on the RFP, and we don't have to do the whole RFP, thank goodness. We're glad we have people that can help us with that. But it was just the scope of work, and got some terrific feedback so thank you for that. But in that RFP, or in that scope of work for the RFP, you were probably all thinking, wow, they're really asking for a lot. And we decided to go with a full-blown wish list of everything that we feel that we need at this particular point in time, recognizing we're probably going to need that to pare that down. And some of those tasks, depending on how the bids come in and the qualifications of the consulting companies, some of those tasks we may need to take on ourselves as a subcommittee, but why not go for the gold? And there may be very qualified companies that come in with a reasonable bid and can handle a lot of this with us. So that's the thinking. But as we all know, for an RFP to fully get out there and get good quality consultants responding and reviewed and negotiated and all that, that could take a couple of months. So when we get to the task groups, some of these things we might have to get the ball rolling on first, and maybe the consultant's going to take over or vice versa, but we certainly can't sit around till June and wait for a consulting company to come on board. So that's why I think some of you got back to me thinking it sounds like there's a little duplication in effort in terms of what was in the scope of work and what's in the task groups, and that's the reason why. Okay, so let me just share my screen again, and all of you had a chance to look at the RFP, and I'm going to pull up see, I click on it and then it doesn't come up. Bear with me 1 second. Let's try that one more time. Maybe it's one click, not 2 clicks. And let me blow this up. Is that coming up? Up, share screen? Nope, I am sharing, so that's good. It's not.
So one comment I would make while Karen's pulling up the document, and why I said it felt cart before the horse. Ideally, the RFP is one part of the overall project plan. So you ideally would start with a project plan and identify within that what your consultant would be doing for you. We don't yet have a final project plan, so we are going to be tasked with looking backwards and integrating the document into the.
I think we mostly need to hear from Suzanne and Sean
Yes,
about
that's-
how this is going to work, because, we're pretty much in the dark in terms of what the budget can be, how we can, do it. We've been talking to Nate and Portsmouth Listens, Michelle at Portsmouth Listens. There may be a need for, because New Hampshire Listens, excuse me, because they bring a particular expertise, can these be dovetailed together? Maybe have two or whatever. So really,
Yeah.
there's a
and that's
lot
the
of questions for you guys.
Let's turn it over to you. We'll make sure all of you have, in some way, shape, or form, the most revised documents for all these things, but I do have the most current. This is what was submitted to Sean last week. So why don't we turn it over to you just to give us an update of where we go from here, now that you've got our proposed scope of work.
So I want to wait. Yeah, so basically, the scope of work is what you all wanted to define, and I know I went back and asked some questions about who's doing the work, and to your point, John, the project plan is going to say, this is all the work that needs to be done, and then the question becomes, what is it you're putting out to bid for a consultant or consultants to do, right? So that's kind of where the process is right now, if this is the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say I was invited. I haven't been involved in a lot of RFPs.
So I'm gonna-
This is-
Yeah.
But just in terms of how that process works, is once there's the scope of work and there's dollars assigned to cover that, then it goes out to the consultants or to the market, right? Okay.
Yeah, so, as I said at the beginning, I've spent 20 years in the legal department, and I've done a lot of procurement over the last 20 years. And if I had my wish list, you would have the consultant here right now to help you massage this scope of work. But we're not quite there yet. So as I see this unfolding, is we take what I will consider a preliminary scope of work, and we package it together in what we call a request for proposals. And that will have multiple parts to it. We're looking for someone who's got the right qualifications. We're looking for someone who's got the ability, frankly, to staff it within the schedule that you're looking for, and then within the budget. Now, the beauty of what we call an RFP in procurement land is that it is not like a fixed bid. So you're not just looking at the lowest qualified bidder for a very fixed scope of work. What you're looking for is to rank the proposals that you get in. So you're getting proposals from consultants. Usually you define what you want in your proposal package. So you may want a list of the team members, you want samples of other products that they've done, you want a commitment to the schedule. You may want them to give you suggestions on the scope of work. Because if they've done this before and they've done it successfully, they might say, well, you've got this scope of work here, but we would suggest X, Y, and Z. And so you look at those proposals. Now we're going to have to figure out how that process is going to happen. And I say that because typically those processes are confidential and they are not handled with a public body. So I like the fact that you guys have already been thinking about what I would call not subcommittees, but work groups. Mm-hmm. So this committee is charged, and I'll put my legal hat on now because all my legal radar was going off while you were talking about different things. I'm like, so as a committee, as you know, you have to take minutes, you have publicly noticed meetings. Well, it's very hard to do a competitive selection process within this type of forum. However, what we've often done from a municipal perspective when we have these kind of mergers, if you will, of a public oversight body along with a procurement process that we want to have some confidentiality with, at least in the initial stages, is we have, the committee selects a certain number of members, not a quorum of this committee, but a couple members perhaps, to work with the staff in evaluating the proposals. So that way we get to not hold public meetings so that we can keep it confidential, and then we can come back with a recommendation to the whole committee. Now, the other piece of the RFP is that it is a contract that you will negotiate. So if you get a proposal, and let's say that proposal is for $66,000 to do all of the scope of work, and we only have, hypothetically, $40,000, we can then negotiate that scope of work with that firm that you would prefer to work for. So you can kind of look, okay, we have committee members. I heard lots of you volunteer and offer up, your different skill sets to do pieces of the work, which is marvelous. And so you can work in that contract negotiation to determine, okay, this is what we need the consultant to do, and these are the pieces that we can get the support from other members of the committee to do some of that input that you're looking to get. And I noticed you already had some of that built in to that already. And that's part of the conversation that takes place once you've identified your highest ranking firm and you start to negotiate what the scope and the schedule and the final dollar amounts are going to be. So that's how that process works most effectively, so that you get the most qualified firm, you kind of fit the scope to both your budget and to the skill sets and work that you all are prepared to do, and see if you can get that a schedule that's going to work. I am concerned. I've looked. Sean passed on the schedule to me, and I thought, ooh, that's pretty aggressive based on my experience. So I think to the extent we can get, even if it's imperfect, a RFP out on the street sooner rather than later, knowing, and this is why I'm here, is we can negotiate and talk about the scope of work and refine it as we kind of see what the proposals look like, whether we've got, frankly, firms out there that are qualified and actually have the time to do it within the schedule that you're looking for. Or maybe you can get 90% of the work done, but you've got, 2 months it's going to, for final contract and that kind of thing, or final product, that might just take a little time. So you're not talking about implementation, you're just talking about getting to the plan.
Question about how do you get RFPs out on the street so you've got a broad range of consulting companies that actually even see it, that push communication?
That was on my list.
Yeah.
So the city runs a procurement process. We have, as you might imagine, a number of strictures and processes that we follow, including once the RFP is out, no one else has contact with the firm while that RFP is out on the street. So what would be helpful to the city as we go through this process, because like I said, we have a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Orderly process, if you will, with boundaries on it. And it would be really helpful to have a list of firms that you might have identified. So I happen to, Sean was saying, I looked at the Biddeford one, for example. So we know that one of the firms that apparently does work like this is this Reinhold Consulting. So you would put this firm on your list to make sure, because the procurement office can do that. We can get a list. And in addition to putting it out on our website, and maybe there's a New Hampshire art organization where we could put it up as well. Like, there are various places where we can post our RFP, but the more consulting firms who you think maybe they would know, give us that list, and then we push out, email notices to firms. So a list of consulting firms that you happen to know. If you've looked at someone else's plan and you see a name on it, put that name down, and we'll kind of put the list together.
I work for a public consulting group. They're headquartered in Boston. I run a division here in Portsmouth and deal a lot with, well, true to its name, public firms, and subscribe to the GovWin site. So I'm not sure if Portsmouth is a subscriber to that. GovWin is singular, not plural.
Yep.
So GOVWIN, and that gets disseminated at large.
Yep.
We have actually a rather large procurement process. A question on, if I may, though, on the RFP itself, and I can't recall reading it. I've had a tough time lately, but typically what I see is a weighted process in the selection because it is public. So having full disclosure, here's how the firm is going to weigh it, based on whatever the case may be.
So in New Hampshire, there is a lot of flexibility when it comes to RFPs. So typically, what we do is we describe you have to set the criteria in your RFP document. So we're going to decide based on qualifications, ability to meet the schedule, understanding of the something. You kind of decide what those qualifications are. And really, that is all you need to put in your RFP document. You don't need to tell them in advance that this is worth 50% or this is worth. Now, you can, but you don't have to. There are pros and cons to doing that. And again, we often will put the price in a separate price proposal simply because if you want to do a two-step process, which we often will do, you can look at qualifications first and then open the price and then see if that results in a re-ranking, i.e. is your favorite firm like way off the chart in terms of price. In this case, my inclination is you don't need to go to that level. You do ask them for a price or at least a scope, knowing that it can be negotiated. And that may influence, frankly, your, or the, I don't want to say the committee, but the working groups, kind of recommendation that would come back here in terms of the firm. I think, I don't have any concerns with this group, that you're going to look seriously at the qualifications. And I think actually schedule is going to be one of your big drivers.
Councilor Cook.
I just wanted to add, I've been through this with two different committees that took two completely different approaches to this. The closest example I have is the Sustainability Committee that is working on a climate action plan. I will note that they did not take part in writing the RFP process or selecting the firm. They let the staff take that lead role because the staff has the experience in doing it. And in fact, the consultant was just announced to the committee, and that was their choice of going through it in that process, trusting the staff to go through the process. But it was really important for the staff in some ways to have the lead because what happened is they put it out for bid and no one bid on the project because of the time of year, because it went out in August. And August, no one was available and had the bandwidth to actually bid on the project at the time. So the project didn't get bid until October and then selected a consultant. It took actually quite some time for them to select a consultant. So it was helpful for the staff to be able to quickly adjust the RFP as necessary without having to call a bunch of people together to have an internal negotiation first before they had a negotiation with consulting firms. So that's just my only caution in the process. I've also seen a committee go through a process of selecting a firm from RFP, and that is also in some ways its own challenge because everyone has differing opinions, and sometimes we kind of overlook the fact that we have staff that has many years of experience in going through this process and selecting firms. So it's nice to be. I would caution you on taking up too much time in going through this process.
I mean, in my ideal world, you would leave here today and we would have enough information to, frankly, kick an RFP out sooner rather than later, given your timeframe.
Do you?
I think really I've got a rough idea, frankly, from your scope, the draft scope that I've seen. I think if you get any input that you've got, that you've collectively put together today, I think it's enough for us to run with, because we may get some feedback from consultants. I think the big thing I would do is probably put some language in there, some flexibility about the timeline, because I'm concerned that you might not get any proposals, or at least not from the firms you would prefer to work with, unless we kind of signal that maybe there's a little bit of flexibility on the proposals. And I know it came up earlier about this Arts Council and maybe creating a more permanent body within the city structure, so that in the event there's some bleed over in time, there's an entity that can kind of pick up and keep running with this. So I think that's for us to kind of build in to this, so that we've got some options to have conversations, because you'd hate to, if you've got one great firm and great price, but they say, look, realistically, we're not going to be done till February, do you really want them not to propose? And I think the answer is no. I think we'd want to have that conversation and maybe report back out to the whole committee, hey, we've got a great firm, great price, but they're saying you're going to need that extra 2 months. I think you would want to know that.
Right.
And possibly make that, recognizing you may have other ways to cross the finish line from an oversight perspective.
I think this is a dilemma, I think. I mean, what we are feeling is a time constraint because of the master plan. We feel very much like whatever we create should be available to inform the master plan. But Susan, what you're identifying is that, okay, we go out, we find a qualified consultant who is experienced in cultural planning, and they'll say, well, to develop a cultural plan takes a longer period than what you have available. So we may want to be strategic and come up with a modified objective, which isn't quite to realize a cultural plan, because that requires time. And maybe there's a way we can satisfy the needs of the master plan and then allow the cultural planning process to last a longer time frame.
She just gave us the perfect solution.
What was that, Jeff?
What she just said? That we bring them on board when we can.
Yeah.
And they would continue working with the new version of ArtSpeak.
Okay.
After our group sunsets.
Okay, that sounds like a great motion as a way to move forward, but that's not what we've been talking about.
But I have a question here, and I don't know whether this is legal or process in terms of the committee, but this is, and this is why I'm asking as a follow-up to what you're talking about here. We're talking about, as you mentioned, John, a very, very short planning time frame, which says to me that there needs to be an awful lot of work that happens between formal meetings of this committee. We cannot wait till the next meeting and then the next meeting to do X, Y, and Z. So what can legally be done, in between meetings of this committee without obviously a committee present in order to expedite this whole process?
Okay, great question, because that was another one of my lawyer things that were kind of going off during the conversation. So the committee, when you're as a whole, you have your quorum, because I did the math. Wait a minute, I wrote it down. I gave you the math. 6. Right, you've got how many? No, it's on your sheet.
20.
20.
Is our membership?
You have 20 members? Okay. Oh, I had counted 16.
20 voting members?
No, we have 10 voting members.
Well,
I had
the
counted
members
16.
of the
It was
Portsmouth
16
Arts and
voted.
Nonprofit Committee are voting members of this committee.
Okay.
So they're,
Not all of them, the ones who are sitting on this committee.
So we can do a roll call, Jeffrey, but look at the list. We have the officers, our regular members, the committee members from the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofit Committee.
Oh, I wrote them.
So
Okay.
I got 3, 6.
Yeah, I had
9,
16, because the alternates.
Okay, 17, you're right.
16,
That's right.
that's
Okay,
16.
so that
That's
means
right.
your
Thank you.
quorum is 9. So what you want to do is make sure any of those work groups are fewer than 9, so that you don't have to use all the formalities. Because your work groups are just that. You're reporting back. You're not really taking action. You're doing work, which you're bringing back to the whole committee for some formal action.
Yep.
So that's kind of your piece right there. Because the city would be sort of in charge of the procurement process, really all we need is enough, green light for you to say, yeah, run with this scope of work or whatever you finish on today. It'll be good enough for us to put something out the door, because we'll put some language in there that suggests that we can massage that scope of work. That's part of the process. And like I said, it may then, when we see what kind of schedule whether we get pushback on schedule, that may go to do we break it down a bit more into tasks and what could be accomplished, say, by the end of the year versus what might need a final, report. I think the other piece is just to get at that, is that I was hearing lots of conversation about sending documents around. Okay, all my lawyers, it's like, red flags are going off, because you as a committee can't have email communications, where it involves a quorum or more. So when you have things to push out to the whole committee, send them to Sean. Sean can check with the chairs as needed, and then distribute stuff BCC to the whole committee. So I say, dear committee members, in preparation for the next meeting, here's some information. And then you guys, if you hit reply all, it is not going to go to all of you and create a unnoticed public meeting in violation of the state law. It's just going to go to the chairs and Sean, which would be appropriate because your chairs set the agenda and bring things forward to the whole committee for discussion in a properly noticed public meeting. So that's kind of my wish list for you, is please make sure that you bring everything to the chairs and Sean, and they can consider how to help shape the next agenda so that you don't inadvertently have meetings that are not properly noticed and not properly minuted. So that's my request there. But that goes to keep your working groups small and make them working groups. They're bringing back product for this whole committee to then formally act on at a publicly noticed meeting. But getting this procurement piece kicked off, I think, you give us the green light to work with whatever you leave with today, knowing that we can do that. And to Councilor Cook's point, in many instances, the city staff is very comfortable running on its own. We know when to reach out for help. On the other hand, Art is not our usual bailiwick here, which is why I suggested what this committee could do is identify maybe 2 or 3 of you who the staff could tap. So if we want to say run by the final draft of the RFP before we put it out, we could say, hey, could you take a quick look at this? Anything that is jumping out at you as a problem? Here's our list. Any other consulting firms we might have missed out there? Any other thoughts? I think that would be useful to have a couple members of this group be, shall we say, part of Team City for this purpose, because we don't do art as frequently as we do engineering services. So that would be my 2 requests. Finish a scope of work and get us a couple of folks who we could informally say, hey, we're going to ship this, because if it's just a couple of you, we can send you a draft and say, here's the draft that's about ready to go out. Here's our list. Any feedback, we can quickly call you on the phone and get some feedback and not slow the process too much. In addition, and I'll just let you know, again, if you have once we get the RFP out on the street and we can let you know, do not have contact with any of the members of those firms until we're done with the proposal process and have a contract signed, because that's problematical. And when companies have questions, we have a little note in our documents that go out that say, if you have questions about this proposal, send an email to, and it goes to a purchasing mailbox that then our folks in procurement look at, and they send back to the right people for answering. So those are the kind of things that we handle on our end.
So I just wanted to make a comment. So this scope of work for the RFP did already circulate amongst the whole subcommittee. We had quite a few people respond, so I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say this is the one that we're going with because everybody had a chance to comment on that. I think from a timing standpoint, if you want to add a comment that says we have some flexibility, or do you need us to add that to this document?
I'm going to add it because I think it would be in your interest. So I'm seeing nodding of heads that no one's going to have a heartburn about that.
That's
So,
fine.
Okay.
And then the other thing is we do have, and we're going to move into that in just a minute, under the proposed task groups, we do have a task group where somebody can, again, be doing a deeper evaluation of the Portsmouth 2002 plan and other municipalities. And while you're looking at those other municipalities, it might be an opportunity to dig in a little bit more about what consultant or consultant group they used. We submitted a couple that we thought could be beneficial. If there's any others that anybody has, I know I've spoken with a couple of you. If you have any other consultants you want to bring forward, I would think those would go directly to Sean. And also going to your point about prioritization, it sounds like that's something that we're going to probably want ASAP. So as we throw out the task groups in a minute, that might be something as people are digging in and learning about these other municipalities, we actually get some consulting groups on the table and sent over to you right away. And then going back to Ed's question, in terms of timing, I will agree, and we've had a lot of conversation about that. The monthly meetings is not sufficient right now. They're too far apart. But what we're envisioning is these work groups are going to be meeting in between. If not, I mean, another option we could throw out is would there be a desire for our subcommittee to have a Zoom meeting or something in between? I don't know if we need both, but certainly the expectation is, or at least what we're thinking, is the work groups will be meeting well in advance of our April meeting and be able to report back. So we think a lot of good work can be done in those work groups. So those were my comments.
Do I send the minutes to Sean? Because last time I sent them directly to Valerie.
I would normally, you could send them to Valerie, but make sure you copy Sean.
Okay, but right now I can only send the minutes we just approved to Sean. Then I can make my draft of this month's meetings and then circulate that to Karen and John for comments. Then we get it, but then we have to circulate, then I send it to Sean, who sends it to the whole group. Then we approve it at the meeting, and then, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Now,
that'll work.
we have 12 voting members here now. Do we need to have a motion to empower you to like this handoff?
No, this is fine.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
Can I just make a clarifying point about the master plan? The process for the next master plan begins in January. It doesn't begin and end in January, right? I
Right.
mean, that is a long process. So, John, I
Right.
just want to address your point about, we got to get this in to make sure it's in the plan.
Yeah.
It'll be considered. It will inform the master plan. That window doesn't open on January 1st and close on the 3rd. Okay, so that's just,
That's good. That was on my list.
So the question I would have, are there expectations for the cultural plan in terms of what information shapes the master plan?
I don't know. I will find out.
That would be great.
I have basically expressed my deep to be on the master planning committee.
Because I think one of the challenges is to develop a cultural plan that is actionable. So we're providing some guidance for the city. Ideally, that guidance would contain some body that's able to take action with what we're suggesting.
I don't know how they all work together, but I feel like if you have an actionable plan, that's good. If that plan will inform the master plan. I don't know what that looks like in terms of.
It'd be great to see examples. And Russ has a question.
Well, I was just going to say there's one more concern about the December deadline than preparing for the master plan, which I'm hoping Councilor Cook might be able to address, which is that my understanding is the tenure of the Arts and Nonprofits Committee, of which this is a subcommittee, expires on December 31st. or at the point of the installment of the next city council based on the next election. So I don't know how we handle that.
I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, that is one of my concerns as well. So if Arts and Nonprofits sunsets in December, then it's up to the next mayor and the next council to decide, well, it's the next mayor to decide to continue this committee or the subcommittee, because it's a blue ribbon committee. So that's kind of at the mayor's discretion, and then also to reappoint everyone who's on the committee, again, at the mayor's discretion, and then the council approves those appointments. There is no reason to assume that they wouldn't, and that it wouldn't continue, because you're partway through a process. But if you want guarantees that the process is going to continue and that the committee is going to continue, I believe that the deputy city manager's suggestion that if you are getting to a stage where you are pretty confident that you're going to want some follow-on entity to administer the plan or oversee the plan, like an arts commission or arts and cultural commission, you can request to have that set up, and that is set up through ordinance, or at least if it is a city entity as envisioned, it would be set up through ordinance, and then it would exist beyond that time frame of end of December, and that entity could then carry on the part of this process if this committee does not finish the process by then. And there's a chance that committee is set up, but then because the process isn't finished, you have a new council and a new mayor that decides to continue this format even, in addition to that, for a few months. But I can't make those calls about how that's going to be done. The one thing I can say is if you set up by ordinance a committee, it will continue. I can't tell you, what Blue Ribbon Committee will be in existence.
If I may, as a reminder, our current mayor took the term Blue Ribbon Committee off of our committee. So it might have just been semantics on his part, but he did say that in one of the initial meetings of this council, that we were now the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee. He removed Blue Ribbon. So for what it's worth, that's a bit of our history.
We need to return to the task groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we just, in the spirit of time, just move in? Do you have another?
I just wanted to say that if you want to ensure that there's an arts committee, then you do need to put it in ordinance form, because the mayor may have removed the language, but this committee will sunset in December, so the end of the year, otherwise.
So a good segue, and that happens to be item number 2 on the proposed task groups. And the way we came up with these is just as we were going through this whole cultural planning thinking process, is we kind of put a parking lot of maybe these are some of the work groups, these are some of the areas we could really use some help. So this was all sent out to all of you, so I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can see just the major topics, and we have a sign-up sheet here on digging into the cultural plan from 2002, doing a deeper dive, looking at other municipal cultural art plans, looking at what worked with ArtSpeak, which is always good to look in the rear view mirror, but more importantly, what's a good possible structure that we need for the 2023 cultural arts plan so it is sustainable for many years to come. There's also the idea of maybe having a steering committee that really oversees the entire project, and a communications team, and then a task group that really helps us dig in a little bit more deeply on what do we want community engagement to look like. And then lastly, if there's somebody that has some amazing IT technological skills, we would love to know who you are so we can get your help. So with that, I'm going to pass this around, and I'm going to ask everybody to please sign up for one of these. But maybe before I do that, just generally speaking, do these task groups feel good? Is there anything that you think is absolutely missing that we haven't thought about when it comes to the overall planning process? And this is going to be work in process. This is not carved in stone as the end-all be-all, but at this point in the game, are we capturing the major areas that you all feel that you can help contribute towards?
Do you view this as a phase one work groups? Because like some of this work will take a period of 2 months and then the work will be done.
Yes.
And then we may go through a process where we say, all right, we finished this phase, now we're going to move. So things that may not be included in here, maybe things that are down the road, and this is the immediate concern. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, I think that's a great way to look at it. Thanks, Rose.
None of these committees have a timeframe or any scope of how much time's involved in it. We sort of learned that from you, Russ, when you gave us the job. So we don't know how much work is involved with them, but definitely looking at the 2002 plan, maybe much more compressed. Working on a communications team is probably overall for the committee. One of the tasks, and listening to what Susan said, saying there should be a select group, we did come up with the idea of a steering committee for this. And Ellen, that was kind of your words you had used in one of the conversations I had, which could be the leading group that's kind of doing the coordinating of the entire process. So, and it sounded like that was something that Susan actually was looking for, is, the high level. So some are short, some are longer. But there may be more.
Is this 5 groups plus a person? Like 6 doesn't feel like a group.
Right.
Okay,
Six.
Well, 6 could be more than one.
Could be more than one,
Could
but
be
it's a
more
different
than
type
one.
of work.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we only have one person, it's a person.
Okay.
I had
Why don't
one question, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The support to the city, is that embedded in the steering committee or is that something separate?
It's a good question. I think it could be, probably, it sounds like it might be the best fit is in the steering
I
committee.
think it would. It makes
I can put
sense.
mine.
Okay.
Awesome.
So let us pass this around and remember your number, and then we're just going to ask, I know for, time, we've got another 6 minutes or so, is that your group just goes off to a corner quickly, and we'll just maybe put the 1s here, the 2s there, the 3s there, the 4s, the 5s, the 6, and just a meet and greet. Hey, we'd love to work on this together. We're on the same work group. I guess we're calling them task groups, so it doesn't get confused. And the hope and expectation is that you will all put your minds together and your schedules together and come up with something where you'll have a chance to meet before our April meeting. And I apologize, this does feel very, very rushed, but I think we got in a lot in 84 minutes.
Well, we said meeting would be 90 minutes.
Yeah, we're trying to stick to that.
Right.
Thank you.
So while that's passing around, does anyone, I think one of the other items on our, is if there are any issues that weren't on the agenda that people wanted to bring up. Is there any other business that we haven't talked about? Oh, we did a good job.
Ellen, where is the,
And then our next formal,
Shouldn't bring Beth up there.
Yes.
Okay.
the next meeting of the Cultural Planning Subcommittee will be Monday, April 10th at noon. And we're working on a location. I think Players Ring has offered to host the meeting. And when we have our technical committee in place, they'll be doing work to make sure all our equipment is there.
Yep.
So is Players Ring announced, or is that still TBA?
Could put the date of the meeting. We've got to work on the details.
Sorry, this is Barbara. I signed up through the chat, so Karen, it went directly to you.
Okay. I'll figure out how to find that. I think it's under chat, there we go. Thank you, Barbara.
So I'm happy to blather a little bit more. One of the things I did was looking at Nashua, who has an arts commission. And so you can go to the City of Nashua website and see their plan. I spoke with their economic development liaison, and I can share that name with you, Sean. She was very, very helpful. And so that's another experience that I've had. See a name, reach out. People are really very generous with their time. So the Nashua Arts Commission wrote their plan without a budget. They did it all by themselves. It took a little longer. I think it took 18 months or so to do it. But when you look at that plan, it does identify time frame and tasks, and it's kind of helpful in that regard. But I have the woman's name in my notebook, and I'm happy to share it with you. She was really very friendly. I also called Biddeford.
John, could I just add to that, going back to Karen and what folks were talking about with the getting the consultants' names?
Yeah.
Is that's absolutely crucial. I just went through a fairly large RFP process up in Maine with Maine Maritime, and because I was federal before and then different state, I didn't realize that they didn't have a system like, Gerard, you were just describing. And once we determined that, we understood why we weren't getting any bids within our range. We were getting basically 3 bids at 200% over. So we went and got a list of all the people I knew to be out there. I canvassed it, and then we submitted it, and we got a great amount of bids. So that is a long introduction to, I would recommend very quickly to support our city staffers. We all, if you have any name, any company, anything that might do this job, we'll determine who it gets into. But please write that company down, because literally I just submitted about 41 organizations to build a fire tower, and that's when we got the reasonable bids.
Yeah, that's great.
Prior to that, it was just, it wasn't
So I
going
would
to
say
work.
across, thank you for that feedback, Ellen. I would say across the subcommittee, if you want to copy myself and John, and let's have that come in directly to Sean. But one of the task groups, the one that's going into the different municipal plans, you should be able to uncover who they used as a consultant or consultants, and I think that could be another responsibility of that task group, is to figure out who those consultants were, what was the feedback from that particular city or town when they were using them to develop their cultural arts plan. If it was very, very, very favorable, and I don't know if they would be willing to share the price or whatnot. If it might going out of the legal boundaries here, let me know. But that would be very helpful to get that in as quickly as possible if you're on that particular task group.
Did you find that communities have done cultural plans in the last few years, or has COVID impacted their ability to do that process?
There's quite a few examples out there on the internet within the last couple of years.
Good.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for the counselor, Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Is there comparable budgets that we can look at for other similar committees, like the Sustainability Committee, and what their budget was for consultants? Maybe Sean's the
Sean
better
can
answer.
answer that.
I can give you an answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the, let's call it $40,000 range. That was $40,000 to $50,000 at the high end. Because it's not budgeted, it was a commitment from the city manager.
Okay.
To,
Yeah.
to fund the plan.
And the climate action plan, which is much, much more detailed and scientific in
Okay.
nature, so it requires a lot of scientific analysis, was about an $80,000 budget total, is my understanding. And that is the consultants doing the entire process without the committee. So that's something to note. That's a very different process altogether.
Yeah.
And I would have expected that to be a lot more money than it actually is. Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's just.
Well, then I have a question, because as I mentioned before, we've been talking to New Hampshire Listens, which has a lot of experience in the public engagement, but they would have some sort of a budget too, so we could potentially be using 2, and we haven't gotten any idea of what it would cost for them. So I'm not sure, that kind of like puts an ambiguity into it if we did want to have two, because it's kind of like an RFQ. We know they're qualified because we know them well. I mean, how would you handle that?
I'm not sure. I mean, we're talking about putting an RFP out.
Yeah.
I didn't get into the conversation with Suzanne, so how do we break it up if we have consultants coming in to say, I'll do this part, but not that part? I mean, that seems a little ad hoc.
And
But
I just want to remind everyone, though, that you cannot hire a consultant without doing an RFP process unless the cost is less than $10,000. It's built into the way we do procurement at the city. So we can't hire, for example, Portsmouth Listens unless they bid.
Did I say, we meant New Hampshire
Or New
Listens,
Hampshire
'cause
Listens,
Portsmouth
unless-
Listens seems dominant.
Right, unless they,
dormant now.
unless they bid on the project, on doing that part of the project. And you might have, if you want New Hampshire Listens to be, if you're interested in using them as part of the process, and you know another consultant that they've worked with on a process like this, you can tell them in advance, hey, we're putting out an RFP. This is before the RFP process starts, just like the deputy city manager said. You can tell them, hey, we're going to put out an RFP. You could work with someone else to bid, so they could be part
a
of.
subcontractor.
Exactly, on a bid process.
Okay,
So-
that answers
So
it.
that's
Thank you.
always a possibility, yeah.
cool.
Okay, so I'm not going to reiterate everything we all just said, but I just want to thank everybody for your input. I think it was a productive meeting. Hopefully it gave you a overview of some of the work that we've been doing. I appreciated everybody's input along the way. So the next big task is to get together with your subgroup. Some of these might be nice and easy because there's only 2 people, and some groups have a few more. And so does everybody remember which subgroup they signed up for? Okay, so subgroup 1, Ed and Russ, if you want to be over here. 2, John, Gerald, Tom, Robin, and is that Robin?
Well, she's not here, but she
Barbara.
emailed me and said,
On 2? Okay.
yeah.
And then over here, we have work group 3, which is Alan and myself. And work group 4 is Suzanne and Karen. And work group 5, I guess is in front of the screen, would be Emma, Amanda, and Jeffrey. And we have no IT takers, so that means we
Oh, I
have to
can
keep
help with that.
perfecting our, is that you?
Well,
Alan just offered.
Alan
Yeah, I can
volunteered.
help. I mean, I'm not
Okay.
magical, but we
All right.
use it all the time. So as long as when we're here, I get a little run through, and when we're somewhere else, we can
All right.
hit Wi-Fi
We
and
would be
Zoom.
very grateful.
Sure.
So then, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second? Yay, thank you. A really good meeting. We're adjourned, and we'll see everyone on April 10th. Thank you.